Hi, my name is Aisha Tasneem.
My name is Rachel Proctor.
And we're going to be talking about cult activity in South Korea, a topic that's become more and more relevant over the past few decades, but especially within the past few weeks.
In the presentation, we're going to cover these three main categories. First, we'll discuss the different types of cults and its history in South Korea. The most well-known religions are Christianity and Buddhism, and many of the cults today are based off of these two groups, plus others. Second, we'll discuss the impact of the cult. Most of the impact is negative, that causes harm to the members of the cult as well as the general public. And lastly, we'll talk about high-profile cases which brought to life cult activity in recent years, which the government does not like to talk about.
This section is where we're going to be talking about the recent COVID-19 outbreak and how South Korean officials claim that a single cult is responsible for the spread within South Korea.
Before we get into the kind of cults there are in South Korea, we first must understand what a cult is.
So the official definition of a cult is pretty much a system of religion that's based around a single person or a really radical ideology. So in Korea, there's an expert in evangelicism named Timothy Lee, and he actually really specifically defined how to identify a cult with specifically South Korean standards. The first criteria would be to understand the freedom with which someone can join or leave the cult. The second would be the transparency in its leadership structure, which basically means how people in the cult understand the responsibilities and the qualifications that the leaders within the cult have. And then finally, the group's attitude towards the larger society can really explain whether a certain church or a group is a cult or not, because oftentimes cults vilify and condemn everyone outside of themselves and ask the public to socialize only within the group and not trust anyone outside of it.
Although we don't have a true number of people who are in the cult in South Korea, there's an estimated over 200K members in the World Mission Society Church of God, and about 300K members in Senchenji Church.
Although we don't have numbers for all cults or for other specific cults, from these types of numbers, we can really estimate how big of an influence cults in South Korea have on the religious lives of the people in the country. So if there are so many cults and if they have such a negative impact, why do so many people join these cults in the first place? Well, the thing is that the South Korean population has experienced a lot of difficulty over the past century, in the past few decades. They've experienced things like the Japanese occupation, the Korean War, and even the military dictatorships in the 70s and 80s. Park Jae-il, a professor in South Korea who studies cults, has a theory that instability and hardship helped popularize religious organizations that offered solace and valorized suffering, which pretty much justifies the people's hardships and gives them a religious purpose.
Okay, so the kind of cults, the first is Christian cults. South Korea has a huge Christian population, and that means they are established megachurches that are often discriminated within the church. These disagreements can lead to future cult leaders leaving the church and establishing their own by poaching or, as it's known, harvesting members from the megachurches to recruit them into the cult. The second type is Buddhist cult. Buddhism is an old and well-established religion in South Korea, and also has temples that may have disagreements within themselves. Cults can be formed when people leave the temple to follow Neon Buddhism. Ideas like coining new people as the Buddha. Finally, there are various other cults out there that have been known to be based off of other religions that are not mainstream and believe in, such as shamanistic and doomsday cults, centered around people thinking that they are godlike. So, what is the impact of cults? How do they change an individual life? Cults have been known to impact members and general public in a bad way. In fact, one of the biggest impacts in around fraud, a lot of times cults encourage members to pursue business dealings and give all the profits to the cult so they could grow. Another impact is brainwashing themselves. Cult members are isolated from the outside world and is discouraged to talk to outside family and friends. When they do this, they become more vulnerable to isolation, where they can become more vulnerable to the leading of the assaults from the cult. Then there's coercion and murder. Members of the cult are devoted to the cause and have gone through many lengths to please leaders of such cults. Many members have been cult-related, as well as indirect threats related to the sickness spreading like the COVID-19.
So if cults have such negative influence, and there's so many people involved, what has the government done about this cult activity? And what are some significant cases in recent history? And here we're going to go through those specific negative impacts that we mentioned before and go into case studies of these impacts. So the first is the Grace Road Church, which is infamous its fraud and exploitation. The church actually moved to Fiji from South Korea once there was a prediction about a famine coming to South Korea. There they established the Grace Road Group, which is a huge group that includes many companies in various industries like agriculture and construction. And that eventually led to them earning the trust of locals and gaining very lucrative government contracts. But there was a dark side to this group. The members were often employed within these companies, but they weren't paid or taken care of properly. They were treated pretty much like slaves. They would work many hours a day, up to 14, and face terrible working conditions and threatened by being deported back to Korea if they didn't meet the standards of the group. All of this was reported by John Power, who was a journalist who spent time in South Korea investigating this group. But despite this, the group was very successful, even winning many awards internationally, as you see that picture there. However, eventually, in August 14, 2018, everything caught up to them as the leader was arrested and each of the facilities that they had in Fiji were raided. And the members themselves weren't really just left adrift. The South Korean government actually gave the former members a lot of assistance and guidance in returning to South Korea and reestablishing their lives.
And then there's Providence, brainwashing and sexual assault. Former members of the cult explain that they recruited virgin women, especially foreigners and white women, that were then advised to cut ties with their families and friends and dedicate all their time to the cult. So the sexual assault, which Jin Young Min Sok, the leader, would take recruits he found attractive as brides and force them to engage with them in sexual activities. He insisted that their sins would be erased by engaging in sexual intercourse with him.
Unfortunately, once these allegations were finally made public, Jung Young-suk fled the country, and it took 7 years for him to be found, arrested, and extradited back to South Korea from where he was found in China. And after he was extradited, he was only charged with rape on 4 counts, instead of the hundreds for which he is responsible, which led to him being released shortly. He remains popular even now after his release and has many followers that defend his actions.
So a former Providence member spoke. There was over 1,000 women recruited for sexual exploitation, and even from prison, he managed it.
And the final case study that we'll talk about is the most significant today, the Shincheonji Church, which is associated with the coronavirus outbreak. Shincheonji is a huge church. Like we mentioned before, it has 300,000 plus people. And these people are encouraged to be really active in their church. They attend a lot of service, a lot of social events. And what happened with coronavirus is that there was one patient, patient 31 in South Korea, who was unknowingly infected while she was traveling. And when she came back to South Korea, she attended a lot of Shincheonji events. And the nature of Shincheonji events is that due to lack of space, they would sit really close together in rows, and they weren't allowed to have any protective equipment like masks. So they would be really, really vulnerable to communication of disease in these services. And the thing about the psychology behind these church members is that they were taught not to care about things like sickness or be afraid of sickness when they're proselytizing. So they're basically told to keep going as much as they can, regardless of how they're feeling. And so this led to the massive spread of COVID-19 in South Korea within the Shincheonji members. In fact, even today, 60% of the COVID-19 patients are associated with the Shincheonji Church. And so when epidemiological investigation started into the church and tried to find each of the members that were infected and who they came into contact with, the government asked the church to cooperate and provide names and addresses and pretty much just information for them to conduct that investigation. However, one of the church spokesmen told us that many church members were afraid to come out and reveal their church membership because of how much vilifying was coming from the media and the general public. Eventually, the church did cooperate for the most part, but because they did it so slowly and imperfectly, they really emphasized that spread. And at some point, there was even a message sent out to members that told them to keep preaching, regardless of how they were feeling, and to do it in smaller groups, and to not reveal themselves to be Shincheonji members at first so that they wouldn't be immediately discriminated. To this day, even there's people who won't identify themselves, and eventually Lee Man-hee, the leader of the church, actually publicly apologized, and that's what you can see over there, that picture. He's bowing to the public for the church's lack of appropriate response. But at the same time, he still pretty much rejects the blame and says that the church was being used as a scapegoat by the public and by the politician. If you have any questions, please let us know. And for our sources and any external reading, including our report and any articles that we've found information in, please visit the sources that will be linked below. Thank you so much.